Marvel is suing to keep the rights to Avengers characters from copyright termination. They've been sued by the estate of the legendary comic book writer Steve Ditko and others as well to get rights back from certain characters. In Ditko's case, sued Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Now, Marvel and Disney would keep some of those rights, so they'd still be able to use those characters, but other characters, maybe not, like Aunt May and Uncle Ben and the characters around the main characters, side characters. So, there's a lot here, so let's get into the article. It's from The Hollywood Reporter by Eric Gardner. It says Disney's Marvel unit is suing to hold on to full control of Avengers characters including Iron Man, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, Hawkeye, Black Widow, Falcon, Thor, and others. The complaints, which The Hollywood Reporter has obtained, come against the heirs of some late comic book geniuses including Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and Gene Colan. I don't know how to pronounce that. The suits seek declaratory relief that these blockbuster characters are ineligible for copyright termination as works made for hire. If Marvel loses, Disney would have to share ownership of characters worth billions. So they'd still have some ownership, some shares, but they wouldn't have complete control, and they'd have to share profits if they lose. And that's a nightmare scenario for them. Other than losing them completely, obviously. That would be the huge nightmare scenario. But this is one of the nightmare scenarios for them. Because you have Black Widow that lost money, flopped basically. You have Shang-Chi that hasn't made money back, has done better than expected though. So we'll see if it ends up making that money. And then you got Eternals coming up. That I think will be a massive flop. I just don't see that doing well. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just can't see that doing well. Then you have the Marvels. So sharing ownership and having to pay some of the profits they make to these estates is a nightmare scenario. In August, the administrator of Ditko's estate filed a notice of termination on Spider-Man, which first appeared in comic book form in 1962. Under the termination provisions of copyright law, authors on their heirs can reclaim once granted to publishers after waiting a statutory set period of time. According to the termination notice, Marvel would have to give up Ditko's rights to its iconic character in June 2023. Marvel is facing other termination notices. For example, Larry Lieber, who worked at Marvel as a writer too, filed termination notices over creations in May. Heirs of the comic book creators, including Black Widow creator Don Rico, are being represented by Mark Toberoff, who once famously represented Superman creators Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in an unsuccessful termination attempt against DC. DC saved off termination by counterclaiming against Toberoff and asserting tortious interference of its rights. The publisher was represented by Dan Petrocelli at O'Melveny, who just so happens to be representing Disney now in its efforts to keep rights to various Avengers characters. Petrocelli is filing several lawsuits in New York and California against Lieber, Don Heck, Patrick Ditko, Don Rico, and Keith Detwiller. The cases will focus on the creation of famous comic book characters who should be deemed the statutory author. The litigation figures focus on the, quote, Marvel method, a loose collaborative working atmosphere where the initial ideas were briefly discussed with artists responsible for taking care of the details. The Marvel method has been the subject of prior litigation, such as a dispute a decade back over Ghost Rider. And it will again, for example, one of the complaints filed today, read here, asserts Marvel had the right to exercise creative control over Lieber's contributions and paid Lieber a per-page rate for his work. Toberoff has a lot of experience doing this type of case. Almost over a decade ago, he represented the estate of comic book legend Jack Kirby over whether he could terminate copyright grant on Spider-Man, X-Men, The Incredible Hulk, and The Mighty Thor. In August 2013, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed the lower court's ruling that determined Kirby's heirs couldn't wrest back his share of rights to these characters because the former Marvel freelancer had contributed his materials to a work made for hire. So this has been tried before, or at least something similar, and it failed. So this could be all for nothing. The Kirby case was then petitioned up to the Supreme Court, with the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg signaling some interest in taking up the case. Marvel at the time fought hard against any high court review, and before the justices decided, the case was settled. Now comes new litigation, which figures to pick up where earlier ones left off. Marvel's suit calls the latest controversy virtually identical circumstances to Kirby's. If the plaintiffs win, Disney expects to at least hold on to at least a share of a character's rights as co-owners. The studio would have to share profits with the others. Additionally, the termination of provisions of copyright law only apply in the United States, allowing Disney continue to control and profit from foreign exploitation. And then she says on the bottom, updated September 24th at 1 p.m., clarified Disney's only facing the loss of full ownership. So they'd still own some of it, like I said. But I guess it isn't in this article. I thought it was that they would possibly lose some of the characters around Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and these other characters, like Uncle Ben and Aunt May and Wong and the Ancient One. It looks like just the worst case scenario is that they'd have to share their profits. But again, that's a nightmare scenario for them, since their future's uncertain with the MCU and Marvel Comics is being driven into the ground, and their movie's not airing in China right now. They really do not want to give up that money. If they have to, they're going to be pissed, and they're going to have to make more money on those Marvel movies to make profits. I don't know how much they'd have to give up, but I don't think it's just going to be a little percentage. I think it'd be a decent amount. Maybe I'm wrong there, but they're already not releasing in China, and when they do release in China, China gets, 75% of that? I might be wrong on that number, but they keep most of it. So, I really don't want this, and not to mention the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit, which is hurting their image, and if they lose that, which I doubt they will, gonna have to give up even more money, and they're just not in a good situation right now. But I think this will be ultimately settled. I don't know with what necessarily it will be settled, but I think they're gonna do everything they can to avoid this outcome. So I don't think this lawsuit's gonna go anywhere other than a settlement. But I guess, what do you think about this? Do you think this is gonna go bad for them? Do you think they're gonna beat it no problem? Let me know. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, comment, share. I have another channel called Thoughtful Outlaw Sports where I talk about basketball, baseball, football, anything else sports related I'm interested in, so check that out. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.